told them what to do. Why didn't they do it? Like, I gave them the solution on a platter and they didn't do it. So we're human, and the answer has to come from them. The same is true, not just for coaching an individual, but working with a team. If you're getting that team to go into a direction and to own a change that's happening in the organization and to navigate a true reset, right? You have to walk people through these stages in whatever way you do it so that they own it. It is a process of ownership. So through the questions that I ask, or that is how they find and they decide what's next.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Today Counts show. This is Jim Piper. Before I get involved in a discussion with our next guest, I want to share with you something called Homework for Life. It's not original with me. It's something I learned listening to podcasts. I think podcast is just a really cool way to learn. I'm going to explain it this way. Homework for Life is kind of like journaling, but it's not nearly as complicated. The idea is that you create a spreadsheet or you have a journal or whatever, and each day before you go to bed, you write down some significant things that you experienced, witnessed, or did that day. You're not even writing 2 or 3 sentences. You're much less than that. Phrases, words that kind of trigger your memory if you were to look back at that time. And then after you do that, you write down a word or two of why that was significant to you. So I'm going to give you an example. But before I do that, let me tell you what I think the benefit is. Now, if you're type A like me, if you're driven, if you're an achiever, I know that, for example, in 2024, I know this sounds really crazy. I don't know. This might sound like I'm bragging. I'm not bragging. My word, I'm not bragging. I'm 64 and a half years old, heading to 65. There's not a whole lot to brag about right now, except I'm fighting aging and all of that. Love connecting the younger generation to the older generation. Love talking about stuff philosophically, spiritually, all of those things. I truly love them. But, life is just too darn fast sometimes. And this process kind of helps me appreciate the day, the week that I had, and in that case, slow life down. So I'm going to show you how this works. So this is just notes for the last 4 days, and I'm just going to expose this. All right. So my wife and I, Rhonda, we like to go to the movies, and it's kind of a bummer that Hollywood has a hard time putting out a lot of good movies. So sometimes it does feel like we waste our time going to the movies. But we went to go see the movie Reagan. And without getting all weird on me about Democrat, Republican, Independent, just, forget all that crap for a minute and just hear me out. The movie wasn't, super fast paced. In fact, Rhonda said that at some points it was kind of slow, and I would agree with that. There were times where it was slow. But the movie overall was a really good movie. It was a reminder of where we have been as a nation not that long ago. It made me start thinking about who was the president when I was in high school, as the Vietnam War was, starting to come to an end, and the whole Nixon thing and Ford and, all the way through that. But I was moved to tears. I was absolutely moved to tears in that movie. And here's why. Agree with me or not, it seems to me that Ronald Reagan was, I'm sure he was ambitious, but his ambitions were for America, for the United States of America. So I don't know. Unless you're somebody gets their nose bent out of shape real easy, which stinks if you do grow up. I would recommend go and see the movie Reagan. Okay. I also had a day where I said, man, I had a rough night sleeping. I worked around the house, super stiff. Something embarrassing happened to me. I embarrassed myself. I was using a power sprayer, and I was doing some, manual labor, which, to be honest, I don't do a whole lot anymore. And I had a hard time getting on the ground to work on this thing. And when I got up, or as I tried to get up, I had a hard time getting up. And I'll tell you, that had a really negative effect on me emotionally. Um, I'm not going to go into that whole story, but what I wrote down under the Reagan comment is, make a difference. And what I wrote down about my experience being an old man is I said, dude, get stronger now. And so I am dead. And I have been ever since I had my left shoulder replaced earlier this year. I've been working hard on physical therapy, but I've been trying to get stronger, as a person. So if you're in my boat, be encouraged, fight back, fight back, fight back. Okay. And then, on Sunday, my son, who is Jim the third, I'm Jim Jr. or Jim the second, and my father, who is Jim Sr. There's also a Jim 4 hanging around. He is 15 years old. But Jim 3, that would be my son, and I had the privilege of baptizing Jackson James. That's Jim's second son, at church. We are members at North Rock Church in San Antonio, Texas. And it was just so cool that the two of us got to get in the tub together with Jackson, who had a huge conviction that week to be baptized. It was just a really cool event. And what was also really cool is our church, North Rock, saw over 200, I think it was 205 people baptized on one Sunday. How cool is that? Whether you're a person of faith or not, you've got to be moved that people have conviction and faith in such a way of that. So that was really cool. I also played golf that day with Jim. I did not play very well. My shoulders are not ready for it, but I had to give it a try. And then, of course, we topped the evening off with the first NFL game of the season for our team, the Detroit Lions. Yes, you heard it, the Detroit Lions. And we beat the Los Angeles Rams in overtime. And we put that ball over the goal line. Took it right down their throat, and that was really exciting. And if you know the Pipers, we're just a little bit competitive, And lastly, our brand new podcast studio was finished as of yesterday. So now we are simply tooling it up, equipping it so that we can improve the quality of our podcasts. And we are so excited about that. So the key words that I wrote down for the first 4 days of doing this again: make a difference, get stronger now, family, and proactive leadership. See, I already felt, by just going over that, I feel like the last 4 days have been significant.
Before we jump into today's episode, we'd like to recognize all those who make this podcast possible. The Today Counts show is supported by the generous donors of the Lead Today community. Also, be sure to subscribe and follow the Today Counts show on whatever platform you watch or listen. All right, let's get back to the podcast.
Penny, I got on your website earlier today, and on your website you have a video of you making a presentation, different clips along the way in your presentation. It was super fun, super dynamic. It caught my attention. And I thought, my goodness, you have a lot of energy. You've got real passion for this idea of focus. And of course, once you scroll a little bit more into your website, you learn about the tragedy of your father, losing your father at the age of 19 on vacation, as I recall. And, you had to battle through that psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, however you would define that. And that was kind of the beginning of something that you have developed throughout your professional career as well as your personal career. And you call yourself the Focusologist. Focusologist. I asked Siri what a focusologist was, and I forget what it said to me, but it wasn't even in the ballpark. So I'm excited to talk to you about that. You have a new book coming out entitled Reset mindset. But what I'd like to do before, yeah, there it is. There it is. What I'd like to do is before we dive into that, could you just give us, maybe a quick 2 minute, 3 minute download, from 19 to today? That's a big task to do, but you've done a lot of stuff. You've built businesses, sold businesses. I think we need to hear a little bit about that.
Okay, in 3 minutes. Let's see, where do I start? Well, I think I'll do it in the thread of focus, right? Which is how we get to today, where I made up this word, the Focusologist. Like you said, at 19, my father died in an accident. And those types of tragic events, they shake up your life, and they really do get us focused on what matters most, right? We get very clear in those critical big moments what's most important. And so that set me on the journey of focusing on what's most important. What do I want to do with my life? How do I want to live it? Who do I want in my life? Even at the age of 19, it was very clear to me there were some people that I was no longer interested in having in my life, right? So, it gets you mature very quickly. And then, after I graduated school, I loved technology. I was actually in the accounting and finance major, but I just loved technology. And one thing led to another, and I ended up in Zurich, Switzerland on an assignment with the company JP Morgan that I was working in accounting and finance. And technology became like, I was involved there also in all the technology parts of the finance. And so let's just say one thing led to another, and somebody had suggested that I get involved in technology. I didn't have the background, I didn't have a degree in technology, but at some point I looked at somebody across the table from me who was a contractor who was doing this, and I was teaching him what to do, and I was more technologically advanced than he was. And he had the background, or at least I was in the area that I was working in, right? So I said, you know what? Why not me? I'm going to do this. So I started my own business working directly in technology and application development. And the focus was, and this is what I was doing on the finance side, which was helping to automate processes so that people can get the repetitive things done more quickly, so they can focus on the things that matter most, the things that require that deeper thinking, right? That are more strategic. Open them up to their creativity. If you're busy doing, you don't have time for the thinking. So that is really what lit me up, is how do we get people focused on those things that matter most, right? And so that was using technology. And then I ended up selling that technology business and got into senior management, working for strategic projects. And then I started to realize, as I was working on these projects, right, is that we were often solving the wrong problem. We weren't asking the right questions. So again, it was, how do we realign and focus on what matters most? And helping people to step back and reassess and get perspective and realign around the real problem, so that we're all working on the same thing. So that sort of is the gist of it, let's say, right?
Yeah.
And then it brings me to, where I then ended up after I left that organization, into coaching and working with CEOs around the world. I was working with a Tony Robbins company, Business Breakthroughs, and helping companies, CEOs, to double their businesses by focusing on what matters most. Blocking out the distractors, whatever form they might be. Today, they're in abundance. And really coming back to realigning on focusing what matters most. So to me, focus is not just about our attention, because you can give your attention to anything, right? There's people in the company who are focusing on different problems. They were or putting their attention towards different problems, but it wasn't in alignment with the bigger picture and with the real problem that they were solving. So focus encompasses also direction. It has to have clear direction, as well as where your attention is, and it has to be intentional. So I kind of see that as attention. It's where attention and intention and that strategy of direction where it meets. That's what focus truly is when we want to focus on what matters most.
I can see how focus is becoming the theme from the time you lost your father, through your story, just to get a better, to get more clarity in this technology shift that you went. So you're working for one of the largest accounting firms in the nation, and in finance and accounting, you kind of lean towards the technology. Of course, they're going to be very involved in technology. Your large companies in America always hate making that shift from one accounting system to another accounting system, because it's a big dollar amount and it takes years to, usually do. But then you get in this application development. So I want to know a little bit more about that. Where would you, as you step back and you look at your success in starting and selling technology, what role did you play in that? Were you the nerd coder? Were you the idea person? Were you? I mean, how did you get that going? I mean, I get that you like technology, but to wake up one day and say, I'm going to start a technology company, when you don't really have that much of a background. I mean, you're using applications. Is it fair to say that was the extent of your experience, or fill that in a little bit more?
Sure. So it wasn't hard code coding. So I wasn't doing C++ or I did that in college and whatnot. But there were some tools that were available that allowed you to develop things more rapidly. And so it started when I was in the accounting side, and I was doing a lot of really complicated macros and dashboards,
Okay.
through macro language. And then I took that and went deeper into not just doing dashboards, but doing, automating entire processes. And so at first I started out doing the coding in that context. But then as I started the company and was doing consulting and doing this coding and was bringing in other people, I'm also a visionary in that context. I'm the person that actually bridges the code and the business, which is, relatively rare, right? If you talk to most people who code, like they're, not the people who would envision a new type of application.
Yeah, but we
So
do.
that's what we did.
Yeah, we do in Working Genius. If you take Patrick Lencioni's work,
Mhm.
there are personalities, if you will, if we can just use that term, that do kind of bridge both sides. The
Mhm.
creative side, the tenacity side. That kind of thing. But you mentioned dashboards. Those are a really big deal. If you can create, if you can organize data and throw it towards um, a dashboard that makes sense for management, I mean, that right there, people will pay anything to have a dashboard that actually is accurate and works, right?
Sure.
Uh,
It's essential for leadership to have the right data that helps them more quickly analyze, right?
yeah,
And giving
make
them,
good decisions.
yeah,
Yeah.
to make better decisions faster. Yeah.
Yeah, for those listening, a dashboard, I guess a synonym to that would be like a scorecard. That makes sense. A scorecard
Mhm.
that makes sense, that you can watch trends and and I mean, if you've got good data on what has happened, you might have a good indicator of what is going to happen. Well, that's fascinating, and then you get hired in senior level leadership for other organizations, but now you are a coach, a consultant, a speaker. Is that the correct words to use for what you're doing? And of course, an author.
Let's take a brief break from the podcast to let you know that our very own Jim Piper has released a brand new book called Story: The Art of Learning from Your Past. Everyone has a past, but not everyone learns from it. Jim unpacks lessons in this book that help leaders and learners understand the potential our past has to impact our present and future. Be sure to grab your copy of the book Story where books are sold. All right, let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah. So 2-time best-selling author now. So already reached Amazon bestseller in a couple of categories. And
it just came out yesterday.
yeah. We were in pre-order, so that
Right.
also, people have had a chance to get it in the pre-order phase.
Let's talk about that for a minute real quick. I'm just thinking about my publisher. My publisher isn't real pro pre-release, and then others are. What's your experience on that? Is it a momentum builder? Some sell it as, gosh, people get tired of waiting, and then they kind of forget. But what's your viewpoint?
Well, see, I'll go through my thought process as it
Yeah.
depends on your goal.
Okay.
You always need to think and back up and say, what's your goal? And so if your goal is that, because in pre-order, they can order it, they just don't get the book in their hands. But you can also have them register with you and give them an electronic copy before it comes out after they pre-order, right? So that's possible. So that's something that I did to keep people interested. So you can come up with ways, but I wanted to build as much hype around the book as possible. And if you understand the way that the lists and the rules work, because business is also about knowing the rules and how you play the game. And so it's the same thing with publishing and, and marketing. It's understanding the dynamics around it. So my goal was to get on bestseller lists with this so that more people would see it and that I could create a greater impact. So that was my goal. So that means that I'm looking to get the maximum number of sales in the first week of launch and also the month of September. Not that I don't want to sell the book at other times, but that is part of my goal. So, it depends. What's your goal with selling your book? And then, then you can back into what's the right strategy for that.
Excellent. I think I'm clicking with you, and I can already sense the way that you think. So let me tee something up for you and let you run.
Okay.
As a leadership coach, as an executive coach, if you were to ask me, what do you find is the reoccurring challenges as you're working with your clients? My answer to you would be, well, first of all, at least at some stage, when age catches up to them, taking care of themselves, their personhood often gets thrown in the back seat. And so that's one category, keeping that leader healthy or getting healthy, and then having routine. The second is relationships, how well they navigate relationships. But the third area, so I would say there's 3 areas, and the third area is, I kind of think what your book is talking about, which can probably be applied in all 3 areas, but specifically getting folks out of what Stephen Covey called quadrant 1, right? Where everything is important, everything is urgent. And when they live in that quadrant too long, not only can they not tell the difference between what is not urgent and important versus what is, and then of course it leads to burnout and all kinds of other things. They pick too many goals. One of the things that we say at our organization is that too many goals is no goals. I mean, so when you're working with these clients, I'm positive that you experience the same thing, because this is humanity. So you walk into the conference room and they give you an opportunity to help them think. They're all over the place. Talk about how your book addresses that.
Sure. So in my world, the first thing I would say is if we're getting back to focusing on what matters most, like you said, self-care and health, right? If you're not healthy, you're not showing up. Like yesterday I was sick and there was a full surrender. I could not work. I had a fuzzy head. You cannot push through when you're really sick, right? And there's that middle area that we push through and we make ourselves sick, and it only
You rebounded. really well.
I have. It was like a little stomach bug that I had.
Okay.
So
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better. Yeah.
but I see all of those things are because we know that there's the wheel of life kind of thing, right? There's the different areas that we need to um, make sure that we're taking care of, whether it's our relationships, like you said, our self, our spirituality, our work and finances, our, that all of them at some point need some attention, and we need to know what's most important in those areas right now with where we are in our life. So when I come into that boardroom, the first thing that we're going to do, and my book is called The Reset Mindset. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to reset, right? We're going to take what I call a reset moment, and we're going to do 3 steps that are going to help us evaluate the situation with some objectivity, because we don't typically have objectivity, right? Like you said, you're in that quadrant run and you're so deep in it that you can't see the mess that you're making, and that you're not really getting anywhere, and that it's affecting your health and your relationships and everything else. So we're going to step back is the first step of a reset practice. In that reset moment, you're going to, when you declare it as such, you're going to intuitively take these steps. So you're going to step back away from the emotion. That might be through a question that we ask to help you to get, better insight. Where are we now? What's working and what's not working? What results are you not happy with? Right? So it could be a SWOT analysis that helps you to get some oversight. That's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? There's lots of different methods, but the higher level mental models, we have to step away. And then number 2, when we're there, is now that we've sort of gotten some clarity on, and one of those questions should be, what is it we're really working towards? What's important and why is it important? So that we get clear and connected to that greater purpose. We understand where we are now. And then number 2 is get perspective. Let's get perspective. Is what we're doing, is it in alignment with our goals, our values, and our intentions? Asking the question, what else could we be doing? How else could we be doing this? Who else could support us? And there's other frameworks that could go into that perspective taking as well, but that's just at its very simplest, we'll stick with questions because they're easy and available. And then that last step is step number 3, is we'd say, okay, now that we're clear on our objective and we know what problem we're solving or what goal we're going to reach, we're clear where we are now. We've got some broader perspective on the situation. What are we going to align around? What's our best next step? And then we're going to do that over and over again. We're going to commit to dynamic reassessment, which is taking more of these reset moments so that we're shortening the learning cycle, checking in more often and being clear that we're still on the right path, because things are changing. There could be a change in the marketplace. There could be a feedback from a customer or an employee who's leaving, who lets us know that something's not working. We need to be dynamic in integrating these changes. And that is the core of the reset mindset, is to be dynamically reassessing and open to reinvention.
I really like that. That's makes a lot of sense. I'm going to repeat some of it and then intertwine it with some thoughts and see what you have to
Sure.
say. We step back because that in itself is an event. We have to push away, get in a higher elevation, if you will, at least in our mind's eye, if not physically, right? We don't always have the luxury of going literally going up to 10,000 feet and looking over a beautiful valley. I mean, but that would certainly help. But because we can't always do that physically, we can do that mentally. We can create some mental space, a little bit of physical space, some quiet pushback, and do that. I think in one of your talks, I heard you quote Carl Jung. Whether you realize you're quoting him or not, I don't know. But you said we need to make the unconscious conscious. And then I think he finishes it with something like this: if we don't, then what happens to us, we're just going to call fate, meaning that,
Mm,
we were out of control. I think you also said
I
in
didn't
your
know
talk,
that. That's good to know that he said that.
yeah. And then you also said that and we've all, I don't know if this is true. It's just, it's a phrase. Perhaps we've all heard this, but we need to hear it over and over again. So much of our stress, so much of our nervous energy, so much of our, you can keep adding phrases and words to that, come because we're focused on the things that we cannot control, the uncontrollables. And you drove that home to that audience, that we really got to focus on the controllables. Uh, and that's part of getting perspective too. But I like how you said, yeah, I like how you said, step two, getting perspective is, among other things, is to think about what is important and why is it important. And, again, that it, because I think what happens is a lot of us leaders, and for those of you listening, you can answer out loud as you're driving or jogging or walking or cleaning the house, whatever you're doing. You can tell me whether this is true or not. So many of you, and I'm not getting mad at you, but so many of you, when you show up to work in the morning, you already need a comeback. And that is a horrible way to live, where every day you got to have a comeback, or every week you got to have a,
Reset.
yeah, you haven't reset, right? You haven't reset. And then I really like what you said there too about the third step is, making the decision of what the next step is. The way that I often explain it, Penny, is when you're at that place now where you're just stressed out, nothing makes sense, that you're mad at everybody, you're mad at yourself, you're in disarray, you go home, you fight with the spouse, it's just, things are just nuts. If someone runs across and says, how are you doing? And you put on your best face, you say, I'm busy, I'm good, but I'm busy. And really what you mean is, I have no idea how I'm doing, but I don't think it's very good. And that's, that's your real answer. But I like to take a client through talking about, in your current situation, whatever context we're in, let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just talk about it. There's just something about naming it. And I think you said that, Penny, earlier. I like to I like to challenge people to, even after they walk through the good, bad, and the ugly, could they take the sum of that and come up with this is a season in their life, and could they name the season? Make it colorful. I'm in a season of climbing a mountain. I'm in a season of digging out a hole. I'm in a season of harvest. I'm in a season of winning. I'm in a season of doubt. What? And it's just, coming back to what you said, make the unconscious conscious. There's something about when you can give Goliath a name, you shrink him down to size. But when you don't give him a name, he seems bigger than possible, to take down. So that makes sense to me. But so you're back in that conference room, and what kind of cynics? I mean, what kind of pushback do you typically get? Because you go, okay, step back, get perspective, next step, right? You don't all get believers right from the get go, right? Because
Sure.
they got all kinds of excuses.
Before we go there, would you mind if I just say something to what you just said about
Oh,
naming
absolutely.
it and making the unconscious conscious? Um, I think that we have a tendency, right? It's part of the way we process, is to kind of delete, distort, and generalize things, right? So I
Mm,
love the fact that you're naming it, and you're you're making it specific as well, right? So you're generalizing it, but you're also making it specific. So when we have something too general, like I'm distracted, I'm busy, I'm
mm,
overloaded, it's not solvable.
right.
When you make it specific, I'm in a season of doubt. Oh, doubt we can work with,
Mm-hmm.
right? Distraction, okay, what, right? And then you can dig down So I think that what you're doing there is helping them to get specific so that it can be solvable, right? To get it out of the clouds, out of the unconscious, but also out of the clouds to something that's very specific that you can work on. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. How do you help them throw their butts overboard though? Because after you are trying to teach them to be mentally disciplined, to get to this place, they have butts. Their boss wants this, customer wants that, blah, blah, blah. I mean, at least I get those. I get,
Sure.
for every solution, I get 10 butts. Right? I'm exaggerating, but.
Well, I think you probably do the same thing, is that
Mhm.
I don't get very far. I learned this very early on in my coaching career if I'm going to tell them what to do. I don't get very far.
That's
Like,
correct.
I'll
Yeah.
tell them and they'll go, that's great. And they'll go back and they won't do it. And I
Mhm.
used to think, I told them what to do. Why didn't they do it? Like, I gave them the solution on a platter and they didn't do it. So we're human and the answer has to come from them. The same is true, not just for coaching an individual, but working with a team. If you're getting that team to go into a direction and to own a change that's happening in the organization and to navigate a true reset, right? You have to walk people through these stages in whatever way you do it so that they own it. It is a process of ownership. So through the questions that I ask, or that is how they find and they decide what's next.
Yeah,
And
so
then,
you're walking them through inductive learning versus deductive, here are the solutions.
yeah,
And then that ownership, comes. It takes us a while to learn that as coaches, doesn't it? Because we're just sitting, it almost feels like we're not earning our keep when we're sitting there answering them,
right,
asking them questions. When we go, just take these 3 pills, and you'll
right.
you.
Right. I mean, there are times when you give specific suggestions, right? But when the butts come, the ants, butts, can'ts, right? Then that's where the questions have to get them to them saying, I need to do this. I want to do this. This is a priority, right? So they have to see it in their own world and their own life. So like I had, a number of years ago, I had a client where we were taking a look at why he feels overwhelmed and why he feels that his people aren't being accountable and so forth. And this is a crazy story. This is a CEO. He spent 75% of his time in his email. And so, and this was a technology company, and he was actually still answering questions that would come in over the helpline. And
Hmm.
it was a sizable organization, but he felt like he knew more. He came from that technical side. You asked earlier, did I start out as a coder? He started out as he developed that tool. And it grew, but he felt like he was the best one who could answer it. And he had to come to the realization that this was hurting him and hurting his people, because they're like, well, we're not going to bother because he's just going to take it over. So why should we? So they became apathetic and they didn't fully own their work. And he wasn't fully owning what he needed to do for the organization. So through some questions and some discovery, right, I had him do a time audit to see where he's spending his time so he could get that aha. And that was critical. And that in itself was the event that had him step back. That's one of the first things that I do is have them really get clear of where they're spending their current time. And then asking themselves, is that the best use of your time? One person I worked with, we valued what his time was worth based on what he brought into the organization, because he was the rainmaker, and he valued his time at many thousands of dollars. And he realized that some of the things that he was doing with this acknowledgement, he could delegate a few of those things that were really $20 tasks or $50 tasks. He could just approve it at the end instead of doing the whole thing, even if it was a proposal. So, he used to spend, let's say, 2 hours on a proposal. We brought that down to 15 minutes, right? So it's, but they have to, we all have to. I'm not saying they, because I can point the fingers back at me. If it doesn't come from me, I might not fully own it. I might say that's a great idea, but I'm still stuck in what I'm stuck in until I realize that I'm making myself stuck.
I think that's really good points. You're bringing back some old education, I'm thinking about Peter Drucker's classic book, The Effective Executive, where I think he talks about 6 principles. And the first one, as I recall, is, uh, effective leaders do what needs to be done, which sounds so elementary, so basic. But when you let that register, when you let that sit inside your soul and you begin thinking about it, oh, so that means that doesn't necessarily mean do what I'm good at, do what I want to do or feel like I need to do. Sometimes the answer to that question can be a very difficult answer. Pop psychology, pop leadership is do what you have a passion for, do what you're good at. And we like those answers, but if you ever been in leadership, truly been in leadership, it's great to get yourself to that place. But often you have to go through the tunnel of doing what needs to be done, regardless of your strengths and not. And to your point, you remember that old thing they taught us in management, and when you do come to the place where you're answering that question, yeah, I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be doing that, even if it's just based on basic mathematics, as the example that you gave, then you got to delegate, automate, or eliminate, right? Those are the things that you do. But let me ask you this, Penny. Answering that question, doing what needs to be done, because that's what you were working with this CEO.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you were driving at. And in the example that you gave, you were able to use logic and mathematics to get to that result.
For that example, yeah.
For that example, can you give another example of how you help people, get conviction on a question like that, a situation like that, that doesn't involve, the logic of math? Because, sometimes when you're dealing with a leadership team, you're going to have 14 different opinions about what needs to be done. How do you get them to that focus?
So I have another example. I'm not sure if this is what you mean, but
Go for it.
there was another leader who was consistently late and canceling one-on-ones, for instance. And he just thought, well, he's the leader, he can do what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't recognizing the impact that it was having on his team. And there was some toxic behavior that was developing in the team. There were some trust issues. And so, often the presenting problem isn't the problem. So I forget what he brought me in for, but it certainly wasn't that. um, but as you ask a few questions and you understand what's going on, you have to help them put the mirror in front of them and to see, well, that what else could this mean, right? Well, so asking him, what else could this mean? So if you're canceling one-on-ones, people don't feel like they're important to you. You're not able to give them feedback that's essential for people to grow and make sure that they're on the right path. When's the last time that you did a satisfaction survey? Maybe that would be helpful, right? So then he can learn through the data. He can take a satisfaction survey and ask poignant questions that'll help to understand, where some of those things might be falling short. When he's late, right? What does that tell people? Does that show them respect? So he was able to see that it was his behavior, even though he was a great guy and people loved him, but that still impacted his impression as a leader. And so he became present to that, and he was able to then because it's like when we realize it's against one of our values, then and the value is to respect others, for instance, he really didn't mean it to be a disrespect. When he saw that it was in direct conflict to a value that he held, he changed his behavior immediately because, and of course he might have slipped back into, but he made, more conscious effort. If he was going to need to move a meeting, he didn't cancel it. He moved it to the next day. He was more intentional and more purposeful because he's following forth with understanding the negative impact that it was having on his team.
Yeah, you've used the term value a couple times, I think, so far,
Yeah.
Penny, and I think that it is important to point out that we can have values that we write on the wall or in our documents that we aspire to, yet when we evaluate ourselves, we're not practicing them. And so therefore they really are just aspiring values until it is interesting, isn't it? Because we can have a boss call us in and do some work, and we learn a lot about the team dynamics. We learn a lot about the leader, and it's really neat when you run into somebody who has a good dose of humility and just maybe hasn't had that transparent, authentic community in which people can talk to their boss about things that are creating obstacles for the team to build trust, to move faster. And it is great. But what do you do as a coach when you run into the opposite? You're realizing that, I don't think this lady, I don't think this guy sees it from any other angle than their own angle. And I've tried the inductive approach. I've tried the deductive approach. When do you, when do you pull up your stakes and move on? What do you do in those situations? Have you experienced that before?
I have let go of a client before. We parted ways because I felt that they weren't open and willing to make the changes that were that we were working through. So that does happen, is you get people who just aren't open and aren't ready and aren't willing to lean into the change. And that's okay. They're just not ready, or maybe I'm not the right person for them. So, there's very much a chemistry and a fit with the coach and the coachee, if you want to call it that. So when it's a fit, it works really well. And it's important to recognize, that comes into the reset in any relationship. To have regular reset moments to check in. So one of the things that I do, and I think leaders can do this as well. At the end of every call that I have with my coaching clients, I ask them two important questions as a reset moment for them and for me. How would you rate this call on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the best? And what was your biggest takeaway from today? So I rate them so that they can reinforce the value that it has for them. So they're making, sure they make the most of it. And and that helps us to have better rapport and better implementation execution. But it also tells me, am I hitting the mark, or did I miss something? Right? So I don't want to just hear a 10 every time. And I'll know if they're not telling me the truth when what's their biggest takeaway. If they're just giving me service and it's just like, in general, like they're going to tell me something specific that affects their business, their behavior, and what they're going to do differently. So that is important for them in the execution, because now they're honing in on that one thing that's most important and what they're going to do about it. And so it's a perfect reset moment. And in that, they're taking that moment to step back, to get perspective and think about what was the most important thing, what to focus on, and then to realign around what they're going to do around that. And then I know what to follow up on and make sure that they're working on. So I think that's not just for coaches, right? Any leader can do that at the end of their one-on-one to have that as a practice, because those things are what make the unconscious conscious, right? That's what that reset practice does, is it helps to make the unconscious conscious.
It's interesting to me that when two or more people come together and they're willing to do the hard work through the process, it could feel like a train wreck. But actually what's happening is we're breaking down the muscle so that we can build it stronger again, even though we might end the session without clear conclusions. We know that we're moving forward by using a different metaphor, breaking up the hard ground. I think that when we talk about personal growth, when we talk about your book, when you buy your book and read your book, we need to come in with a mindset to clear a mindset and say, what can I learn here? And even that right there will get you in a winning way. It's encouraging that you have, watching your videos, it's pretty darn clear that one of my mentors used to say, you got to be the number one believer. You believe what you're preaching. You can't mistake that. And one of the reasons you believe it is because it's worked for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's worked for me, and it's worked for the hundreds and thousands of people that I've coached and worked with. So yeah, I am a believer.
So if I'm picking up your principles of resetting, stepping back, getting perspective, and best next step, this is something that can happen a dozen times in one day.
Absolutely.
So therefore it becomes a way of life. It becomes a way of thinking, each and every day, whether you're at home or work or wherever.
Absolutely. I mean, and the thing is, when we think of the word reset, we often think of it in terms of big pivotal points. Like, we're going to reset because, we just have COVID or a market change, or, something dramatic has happened and we think of a reset. But like you said, those resets are present every single day, right? We can notice, we can avoid burnouts and breakdowns by noticing more, and taking more reset moments helps us to be more professional noticers, right? So that we're recognizing when a relationship is headed down the wrong way. Where, I had a relationship, I had a number of different difficult relationships when I was on this executive team. Long story short, I wasn't really welcomed. It was only the CEO that wanted me there, and the rest of the team did not want me there. And our relationships were built off of that, right? They didn't want me there before I came. And certainly when I was there, they showed me every second of every moment. So I was very present to that. And I had to be very present if I wasn't careful to my emotional state as to how I was going to show up and work within that environment, right? If I wasn't going to quit, which that was an option, but I had a connection to the CEO, to the objectives that they were looking to achieve. And so for me, it was about how to bring everyone together and get to our conclusion. So, in a way, when I was able to, I could gamify it a little bit, think of it as a challenge. But, there were still times where I totally broke down. But I was present to how I was showing up. And because I had this one of the easier situations was my neighbor, who happened to be in offices. He was the HR director. And he was relatively new to the organization. So he wasn't one of the ones that, he came in later to the executive team, but clearly he was influenced. And it was just like pulling teeth to get anything done. And I thought, what is going on? So I just kind of brought my humor wherever I could. I looked to find solutions whenever there was a block. And there was a day that he came into my office and he said, "Penny, I owe you an apology." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I owe you an apology because I allowed other people to influence my opinion of you, and they were wrong." And so it was me being conscious of how I showed up that helped him to reflect and to think about how he wanted to show up. And I'm telling you that from him saying that to me, and this is for any leader, him acknowledging that he made a mistake, I knew from that point forward, with that level of integrity, that he had my back and that we would work amazing together from that point. And that was true. Even if we didn't get to a result or whatever, there was no tension. It was because that immediately, Stephen Covey Jr., right? MR Covey, he talks about the speed of trust.
Yeah.
That was it right there. What he said, and the integrity he brought, and the vulnerability, is that created trust in the moment for both of us. And It was never broken from there. Even if there was a question of things, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and he gave me the benefit of the doubt.
Your term noticing seems akin to my naming. It seems like a synonym of ideas. Because I want you to talk just a little bit more about noticing before we go.
Okay.
When I don't remember who taught me this, but somebody taught me that if I know that I'm in a difficult situation or I'm going to go back to it tomorrow and the next day and the next day, that as a unique human being, I have the ability to go there ahead of time in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
actually experience what I'm probably going to experience there, see myself interact with that experience in the most appropriate and effective ways in my mind first. In other words, make predetermined decisions about how I'm going to navigate that situation tomorrow. In other words, I've kind of like your
You're
pre-sale on your
visualizing.
book
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I am predetermining
Yeah.
how I'm going to posture myself in
Sure.
that, and that works.
Absolutely.
It
Well,
really,
I
it's
can
kind of
tell
like
you,
an out of body experience. You do that first, and then you pop in reality.
yeah, I have a couple things to say about that. Yes, it totally does work. Visualizations. I mean, we know that athletes do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They envision themselves doing the best version of that stroke or that layup or whatever it is, and therefore it actually, becomes a reality.
Eventually, yeah.
Right. Um, so it's proven in that way. And it's also, in a way, isn't that role playing? Don't we do it in sales all the time? Hey, let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about and actually play out what the objections could be and find the best solution and the best answers to respond to those objections. It's the same thing. We need to do those role playing activities as leaders just as much as our salespeople need to do them. um, and in a way, what that is getting perspective. It's perspective taking, because you can't just practice one way of handling a situation, because you need to think about the different responses that might come up
Right.
and be ready for that. And
Right.
of course, when you prepare, then you're going to be more calm in the situation. And so all of that preparation is extremely valuable. And it's exactly the thing that people don't take. That's where they say, I don't have the time. That's why they cancel those one-on-ones, because they're not prepared. They don't want to have that difficult conversation. So they just cancel it.
Yeah, it goes back to that old saying. Remember, you can kill them with kindness, and sometimes when kindness is often seen as soft and fluffy, but sometimes kindness is a truthful statement without a lot of the emotion that comes along with it, and the calming presence. So that's really good. Talk a little bit more about this noticing idea, because I get a feeling there's more to this.
Well, so I was thinking about what you said, naming and noticing. It is definitely, I'm trying to think. I've never been asked that question before, so I have to think dynamically right now. They're definitely,
I'm testing you.
you are, right? They're definitely, I love these kind of conversations though, because it makes me stop and think. Um, and so they're definite, naming is definitely noticing, because you're able to articulate it. You're noticing it, but you're also giving it language. So that's important, right? To the noticing. It's not enough if you just have awareness of something, but you can't, like I said earlier, it's about getting specific. And when you get specific, then you can work on that. And so that's what the noticing is that initial stage of making the unconscious conscious, like you said earlier, is things that are happening around us, getting ourselves, recognizing we're on autopilot, or that we're constantly distracted, or that we're avoiding a particular person or situation.
Yeah.
It's noticing that. It's noticing the discomfort, and then digging deeper, right? The professional noticer digs deeper. It names it. It challenges it. It looks to remedy it, like in the context of,
It's almost like
like you said,
constantly narrowing the focus, slowly but surely, right? Because you can name something or notice something, and at that point it's still kind of broad, but as you continue to notice, maybe your thesaurus, maybe your linguistics continues to get a little bit more accurate, as you just continue to shrink it down. So even though it's ambiguous to say to everybody in the room, this is a difficult problem, that's still a good thing because it releases the tension in the room. That does anyone here besides me recognize that this is a bad situation? We're in a bad situation. But when you acknowledge it, then that part of the air leaves the room. And then you can say, but let's take a closer look, see if we can find any answers. Then maybe, an hour later or a day later or whatever it is, we're no longer talking about a difficult situation. We're talking about, we've come up with 3 possible strategies to address this situation. Well, now we've tightened the noose, even more. Or we can say our relationships on this team are dysfunctional.
Yeah, I said drilling down and getting
that's not a bad thing to say.
It's simplifying and clarifying.
Mm-hmm.
And naming is part of that, like you said. And then it's
just like your 3-step process, that it will eventually get you to the next step. What do we do? Right?
Yeah, exactly. It leads you to clarity on the next step, right? For yourself, for the team. But yeah, I mean, that is what I would see is that deeper process. But like you said, so to notice, you step back and you notice it. What does this mean, right? That's the kind of the stepping back. But then the perspective is digging deeper and wider, for you to see, okay, how does this impact us and all the different pieces that need to be there. And then the last part in the noticing is, what do we do next? Yeah. So it's,
that's good.
It's crazy though. When we talk about it, it seems like, okay, like you said, that's ridiculously oversimplified and, notice, duh, a professional, the whole thing was like a duh, but we're human and we get stuck. And so we don't see the duh, and we need someone else or a practice or a process or a question to help us to get out of the emotion and the place where we're stuck, right? That's just the way that it is. And the more simple it is, the easier it is to put into practice.
Yeah, but I'm going to stick up for you here. The steps might be simple, but when you're in each of those steps, it's not easy.
Right.
And there's a difference between easy and simple. So when you are stepping back, have you really stepped back? I mean, you got to say, am I stepping back?
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it would be great if you went up to the Rocky Mountains to step back, but you're not going to be able to step back every time by taking a trip to the mountains. You're really going to have to work on your emotional intelligence. It's one thing to look like you've stepped back, but if you know yourself that you're just putting on a good show and you haven't stepped back, I mean, point is, we could drill down into each one of these, which I'm sure your book does that. And I'm excited. I'm going to order your book, Penny. I'm going to order your book because I've got some stuff messed up in what I'm doing, and I gotta practice these 3 steps and get into it and learn from you. Give us the name of the book again and where we can get it. I'm assuming it's Dr. Amazon, but
Dr. Amazon, yep. The Reset Mindset.
The Reset Mindset by Penny Zenker.
That's right. And so you can get one on Amazon, but if you want to do a bulk order, you want to introduce this to your team, for instance, and have me come in and do a talk and dive deeper and help people really bring it into a part of their culture so that they're more agile and adaptable in the way that they work, then just contact me and You can
Yeah,
just get them
if
in
you're
or
if you're a team leader and you've got the bandwidth, I would really suggest you go with that approach, because you can gift the book to each of your team members. Penny makes more that way, which helps, and of course, being in her presence is going to make a bigger deal than just passing out the book and doing a book club, turn the page discussion about it, because she's going to be able to clarify, bring Q&A and whatever else you do.
much deeper impact, right? Much deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people, I I always was a little amazed when a client is willing to fly me out, put me up at a hotel, pay all that other stuff when you have great technology like we're using today. But as good as this technology is, there's nothing better than being in a room with people where we can have the human experience together and all that comes with it. So if that is something that can be done, I would certainly pursue that. I will say this: in every opportunity that I've had, at least that I can remember, I'll qualify it that way, those become lifelong friends and lifelong network, at least, if not repeat business. So you'll be surprised what you get when you do it in person. But at the very least, get her book and read it. Penny, thank you for joining our show. We'll make sure we have all this in the show notes as well.